Hello, welcome to this drawing video. I actually recorded about 40 minutes of audio and realized my microphone was not on. So I apologize if the audio and the video don't completely match up. I'm going to do my best to explain exactly what I'm doing. So this video is about drawing an object from observation. We have a couple different steps. I'm going to explain them. And I think the first thing that you want to do is find a good picture. Either find a good picture or have a object on hand. And when you do, you want to get some really nice lighting so that you have some nice highlights, some nice bright areas, some nice shadows. And if you can, get a nice neutral background. That's going to make it easier for you to draw your object. Now the first thing that you want to do before you even start drawing is visualize. So both look at what you're about to draw and then think about how it's going to look inside your head. What steps you plan on taking when you're about to draw. So when I look at an object, I think about what shapes I see, the values, maybe even how I'm going to do it. That's going to make it easier down the line. After you visualize what you're going to do, you need to choose how you're going to do it. There are a couple different ways in order to draw. And hopefully I'm going to show you in a little bit here. There is one way to do it where you could just draw the contour. And the contour is the line around the object. It's the most basic way and the easiest way to do it. Now the thing about drawing just a contour or just a line drawing is that it might not be as accurate as you'd hoped. So if we were to look at what I just drew here, the stem is a little thick, the top of the pear seems a little bit too tall, and the bottom of the pear, I'd probably use a different shape for it. In essence, it could work, but if I'm going for accuracy, I'd probably want to go with the next two methods that I'm about to show in just a little bit. The second method is where I would try to find very basic shapes that help describe my object. In this case, I could break it up into two circles, kind of like a snowman, or at least part of a snowman. And once I have those two circles drawn in, that's when I'll draw the outside contour. So it's just adding an extra step in the beginning, and it's finding those basic shapes. Now, when I have those basic shapes, my proportions will be a little bit more accurate. The top is looking a little bit more true to size, and I can actually make that little bump on the right side of the pear pop out a little bit more. Now, there is one more method that is more accurate than just using shapes, and that's using lines, guidelines. So here I drew the middle line first. Well, no, not the middle line. I drew the top of the pear and the bottom of the pear, like where those lines would be. And then I drew a line right through the middle. After I drew that, I kind of drew the sides to see how wide it's going to be. And I kind of put the pear in a box. You can use guidelines however, which way you want. And after I have those guidelines, that's when I'll draw the contour again. And I think this is the most accurate that we'll see the pear. Use guidelines however, which way you want. This is the method that works for me. I think it's important though that you try to find that middle line, the middle of your object. That really helped me figure out the proportions of the sides, and that felt really good. And you can actually see the difference between my left one and my right one. I really like the shape of that right one. And in fact, I'm even going to compare it with the line drawing. Again, that line drawing isn't super accurate. It does the job, not very well. And here we're going to see the difference between those three methods. So that first one is just looking at my picture and drawing the outside line. But we want to add a little bit more structure to our drawings. Second method, breaking down our object using shapes. That does help, but may not be the most accurate. A lot more accurate than the first one. The third one is using guidelines. In this case, I used a guideline to find the middle, the top of my pear, and the bottom of my pear. It also helped kind of figure out where that transition between the top and bottom would be, as well as how wide it is. And there I'm talking to myself. If you also notice the way I drew the third and the second one. My third one, I used straighter lines. While pear's not super straight, I think it feels really good. Those lines are very confident. I use very long lines, and there I'm actually adding my shadow shapes as well. And for a beginning of a drawing, it's pretty good. Now, I think I'm going to do one more object as well. An object that is a little bit more complicated because pears and fruits are a really good way to build up those foundations. But a lot of objects in our world have more complex shapes, different curves, and on top of that, they'll have shapes connected to shapes. I'll show you what I mean in a little bit. So go ahead, finish up your pear, and think about what object you would want to draw next. And we are back. Here's my second object. I decided to go with a teapot. Now, this teapot is a pretty good object to start off with when it comes to more complex shapes. The general shape is pretty similar to a pear, but we have a handle, a spout, the handle near the spout, as well as the lid. Now, when I'm drawing my teapot, I'm going to be going with that third method, where I'm using a lot more guidelines. And one thing that you're going to notice when you draw objects that are more complicated like this is that you might have a harder time figuring out where those objects go, such as the handle, spout, and lid. I'm actually going to go come across these complications. So again, I start off finding the top and bottom of my teapot first. Once I figure out the height of my teapot, that's when I'll draw my middle line. When you're drawing that middle line, try to be, or just all these guidelines, try to draw very lightly. After I found that middle line, I'm going to start penciling in the general shape of that big mass. When it comes to breaking down my shapes, I like to work from big to small. So start with that bigger picture first. After I find that bigger teapot shape, I'm going to start moving on to those other shapes. I'm not going to draw them right away. I'm actually going to figure out where to put them. So I need to think, how high is the lid going to be? I'll just do a little line like that. Where's the handle going to be? Might go right there. Where's the spout going to be? Maybe it'll go right around there. And you actually saw that I shrunk it a little bit. So I'm not drawing it complete one-to-one. I'm drawing it a little bit smaller, which is actually a challenge. So again, before I even draw those objects in, I'm trying to figure out where they're going to be connected. And I use lines to indicate that. One thing that I'm also looking for, as you see me draw a little line there, is I'm looking at the bottom of the handle and how much space I have between the bottom of the handle and the spout. There's about that much space. I'm going to check those lines that I put in there. When I measure my lines, it's not as big. So either I need to figure out if I need to move the spout down or the handle down, or the spout up. I figured that the spout could probably go a little bit higher, since the handle is the lower object. Now I'm trying to figure out where the top handle goes, right? And it's good to put in those guidelines. They're really easy to move around. If I were to draw that whole thing and then realized, uh-oh, I made this too big, or this is too high or too low. It's going to be a lot harder to figure out how to make that correction, right? So use these little lines to kind of figure out where they're going to go first. And again, I'm using these very straight lines. I really like the look of straight lines with curves because I can always add the curve later. I think it's a very clean look. And it's actually right around here where I start to realize some issues. And you could probably see it right now. When I'm penciling in my lid, one, I'm making it a little bit too big compared to everything else. Two, it feels like I am scrunching it up too much. There should be a lot more room on the top of the lid. And I instantly realize that handle is way too close. That needs to move over a little bit. And it needs to shrink. So shrinking it, moving it over, gave me a little bit more room to play with for this lid. I realized that top part needs to be a little bit smaller. And as I do this outer circle, you're going to see, again, it feels like I'm crunching it in way too much. I have a lot more room on the right, and that feels a lot better. But that left side of the lid is feeling a little weird. So I need to take a look at that handle once more. Now, there is something that I'm going to talk about now. And that is the idea of space. Now, while I'm working with my guidelines and putting my shapes in, I'm also looking at the space of an object. There, space. And there's a thing called positive space, and there's a thing called negative space. Those are all the elements of art there. We have space, line, shape, value, color, and texture. Form as well. Positive space, if you look at the teapot. Positive space is the object that you are drawing, which again is going to be our teapot. Now, negative space, I'm going to use a blue pen here as I refine my positive space a little bit more. The negative space is going to be the area around your object. In this case, it's the background, the table, and the tablecloth. That's my negative space. Now, I'm going to use the idea of negative space to help figure out what is wrong with my drawing. And I'm actually going to look between the spout and the handle. What shape does that look like? And as I'm looking at it, it's actually a lot more narrow than what I have in my own drawing. So I need to move that top handle even further to the right. And sometimes you won't notice these things until you're a little bit further in your drawing, which is why we want to draw nice and light. Once I move that handle more to the left, it's going to be a lot easier to fit my lid on my teapot. Now I look, the negative space feels better. Maybe not 100% accurate, that's okay. I'm just going to go ahead and restart this whole lid. But it feels a lot easier to fit in that shape and that size. I'm going to speed up this drawing process a little bit. And one thing you're going to notice is I'm going to be flipping the picture. Your hand actually is in a natural curve, like a C curve. Kind of bend it back and forth and you'll see that natural curve. When I'm putting in those final lines, that is when I start to smooth out those hard straight lines. And I try to get them nice and long, as well as connected. Right? You want very confident, smooth, long lines. It's okay if you go over it maybe once or twice. and it just makes your drawing look a little bit cleaner. And here we have it. We have our finished teapot. I'm going to go ahead and put it right over my reference. See how good I did in how accurate I made this teapot. In this case, I'm going to match it up to the size of the biggest shape. And that's not too bad. I do have some areas that are a little off, but for the most part, that's pretty passable for me. I'm happy with how that turned out. I could probably use a better guideline for the spout and the handle, but the main shape feels really, really good. So, thank you for watching this video. I hope you learned a thing or two. If not, maybe you enjoyed watching it. The next video, I'm going to be doing a still life with multiple objects. It's going to be this one right here. Shapes aren't as complex as the teapot, still has a fair amount of difficulty. I'll see you next time.